what was really interesting is there have been a number of occasions in my life where I have consciously made the choice to step out of my comfort zone without fully considering what that decision will entail and how hard that decision will be. Because I'd be lying to you if I told you that I did not have a choice.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone podcast. I am your host, Farhan Bundeali, and I am an immigrant and a digital nomad. A life well lived demands that you break the stereotypes of your life. And sometimes life pushes you way out of your comfort zone at a very young age. In this episode, I open up to my friend Sinjin about the story of my life, my roots as a third culture kid, being separated from my family at a very young age due to war, my love of languages, and the story of me coming to America.
It's really nice to be able to get to interview you and get to know you a little bit more. And one of the things that we're going to go into today, because I think we're going to make this into a kind of a few-part series, because there's a lot to unpack with your journey as well as anybody's journey and the stories that we can get into. And it really goes back to where you were a refugee. And I would love to learn more about that and how you essentially... We can get into how you came to America, but maybe before that, the situations that you were in and what really almost made you, in essence, get out of your comfort zone, where you maybe didn't even have the choice. It was almost kind of put on you, and which we all have that growing up and going through life. And this seems like one of those areas where not a lot of people have that experience and not even really know what that's like, including myself. I don't know what it's like to be a refugee. I don't really know many people who went through that experience. So I'm really excited to understand more of what that was like for you and what that's like for maybe other people and the experience that you had and what that entails when it comes to getting out of your comfort zone. So with that being said, I mean, maybe just start wherever you'd like in that sense.
Yeah.
And then from there, I can just learn a little bit more and we can dive into more questions and understanding.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a great place to start. And the thing that I would love to begin by saying is that when we think of the term refugee, I think most people, including myself, picture something very dire, right? Escaping bombs and all of that. And I want to sort of clarify that though I was a refugee in a lot of senses, our circumstance wasn't as dire, right? In the sort of spectrum of refugees, we were very privileged. But that does not, I don't want to dismiss how powerful that experience was still for me into making me who I am today, right? And so with that, I grew up in the United Arab Emirates, about an hour or so outside of Dubai. And growing up, we were a very close-knit family, and I was very much a mama's boy, very close to my parents. And when the first Gulf War happened with Saddam Hussein, there was sort of this sentiment that if children or people who didn't need to be in that area, they should be sent away. And so my parents made the decision to send my sister and I to go live with the grandparents. Now, what you have to realize is up until this point, I didn't really know my grandparents. And the UAE, and being that we spent a lot of time in Dubai, it's a very different world compared to Pakistan, which is a low income country, right? And so it's as though we were forced to move without me having the family as a 5-year-old that I was used to. And most importantly, my mother and my father, right? And so in a way, it was akin to this kid being ripped away from their mother. And so you can imagine how difficult that must be and be put in a very different environment. But it wasn't like a very different environment like the US, where, standards and cost of living is somewhat comparable. It was in a low income country. And specifically, in a country where there's a lot of poverty and a lot of destitution, right? That I was forced to reckon with and witness without having a social, emotional support system to be able to process it, right? I still remember, going to the market with my grandfather and being deeply impacted by what I saw, the poverty that I saw. And that's really shaped me into the kind of person that I am today and what I want to do with my life, right? As difficult as that time was. Additionally, the other thing that, as difficult as that experience was, where I didn't have a choice in this matter. I was forced out of my comfort zone at a very young age. One of the amazing things, not to say that, sort of being subject to witnessing the plight of humanity, is not, good. I think everybody should be exposed to that so that they're empathetic. But the other thing that came out of that experience was my love of language, right? In a very short amount of time, I became fluent in multiple languages. So Hindi/Urdu, which was the predominant language, in our immediate community, and then Kutchi, which is a regional language within a particular part of India, which is where my ancestors are truly from. That's something that my grandparents spoke in the house that I was able to pick up and be essentially fluent in. These adults would be taken aback by this 5-6-year-old kid speaking beautiful Kutchi, and that's where my love and gift really of being able to pick up on languages, I think, came from, right? And the last thing that I'll say about that is, change has to be accepted. As part of living life, we are forced to change. And it is how we adapt to the change, whether it be a choice of getting out of your comfort zone to make the change in your life, or, the life prescribed circumstance that forces you to change. Ultimately, it's how you adapt to that change, which allows you to grow into, who you are, right? And for me to be forced to do that in such a radical way at such a young age, I think really ingrained within me a gift of being more adaptable, malleable to my changing environments. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being 5 years old, there's a lot of impact on the psyche. I mean, there's a lot of things that you are absorbing and being able to now utilize as in your adult years from that experience. And just to maybe clear things up for the listeners as well as for myself, this is before you're not actually in a refugee position at this moment. You're just with your
No.
grandparents right now.
Yeah, at that age, I am just with my grandparents, separated from my family, the
Right.
family that I know. Yeah.
And how far away is Pakistan from where you were living with your family?
So I think anywhere between a 3 to 4 hour flight.
Okay. Okay, so it took a plane trip to get there. And then when you're with your family, so you're being exposed now to a totally different environment, and you're relating that to more of would you say it's like poverty type environment that you were in specifically with your grandparents, or was that just kind of what you were witnessing around you when you'd go to the market?
Yeah, that's a very good question. My grandparents, according to the standards that I was used to living, it was significantly lower. You know, but compared to the local standards, they were living in a dwelling that was, above, like they were doing better than the norm. You know, and to your point, all the poverty and the destitution that I witnessed was, outside of the immediate home. So we always had, enough to eat, a good place to sleep, and our needs were met. We had good community, but it was just because Dubai actually, more so than the US, sort of eliminates poverty, right? And when I say eliminates poverty, they deal with it in not so good ways, and we don't need to get into that. But for anybody who's been to Dubai, it's very rare for you to see any destitution. Like, you see way more in the US than you do in the UAE, right? And so imagine like being in this bubble of living in like a resort town.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like when I think of Dubai, I think of like the massive skyscraper like buildings within they made that island that's into a palm tree or whatever out
Yeah.
there. I haven't been to Dubai, but I've seen a lot of pictures, and it's like this, exactly like what you're saying, like this resort type town or your city kind of thing.
Exactly. So yeah.
Yeah. So what language was your parents fluent in as you were growing up to the age of 5? And then when you met with your parents, so you are now speaking multiple languages, not just from what you were speaking growing up with your parents, but now in an environment that has multiple languages being spoken as you're out and about, as you're with the family, and as you're in this environment that's different with your eyes, but now with your ears as well.
That's a very good question, because my parents are quite visionary in the sense that when I was born, I'm the oldest child, they recognized the importance of English as a global language. And what's crazy is the first language that they actually taught me was English. So I was, in some ways, that was my first language. And I didn't know as much of my own native tongue. And so then I go to Pakistan, and there's very little English being spoken except for, in school. And so what actually ended up happening is my English proficiency decreased quite a bit because, it was Hindi, Urdu, Kutchi that like took up, some Gujarati that like, took up the lion's share of my mental space devoted to language.
Right. That's really cool. So your parents were pretty cultured already. Were they world travelers at that time, or they just understood as people were probably influxing into Dubai that they kind of were seeing maybe this language being spoken more than their native tongue, so they just kind of realized or made the decision to teach that to their children right off the bat to get more, I guess, accessibility for you in the long run.
Exactly. And I'm very grateful to their decision to do that because even when we came back, my parents always encouraged us to be prolific readers. I would get in trouble because my dad would catch me reading my books, for fun at like 2, 3 a.m. at night on a school night, right? And, as an immigrant, to have such a strong proficiency in English has served me really well as a communicator, both written and oral.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that about you. So, and you speak very good English, and I didn't actually even know that you spoke any other languages. So can you still whip those languages out, or at least understand if somebody else around you is speaking in these other languages, you can pick up on it and understand it? Or did it stick with you, I guess, throughout your life? Or did it I guess that kind of goes into more of your story, is as you were still living with your grandparents in Pakistan, was it continuously going into like deeper and deeper of your vocabulary, or did the shift from this moment of your life into the next moment kind of take away that vocabulary or that constant language that you were being exposed to?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So what I will say is that, basically my Kutchi or Hindi/Urdu or even Arabic, right, is nowhere near the proficiency today that I had previously. However, what I believe is that if I am put in the right circumstance where I've just been immersed, like I go back to, wherever, and am immersed in that language, I will get it all back because it's in me. I might have forgotten it in one part of my brain, but it's there in another part of my brain. It's just a matter of coming to my like very conscious mind.
Right. It's kind of like riding a bike in that sense, where you essentially pretty much probably got on the bike and started riding it pretty well at one point, and then just kind of got off the bike for a while. So I'm sure if you were put in the right position, you could get back on and figure out how to work the pedals and the brakes and start moving around. So that's cool.
Exactly.
Well, let's continue forward then. So you're with your grandparents, and for how long are you with them, and then where did the transition happen, and what happens from there?
Yeah, so I was with the grandparents for about a year, and at that point the war wrapped up, and we came back to the UAE, and from there, in the UAE. It was obviously, again, challenging because here I am, in a position where I don't know much Arabic, though you don't need much Arabic to survive and thrive in the UAE. But my English isn't where it used to be, right? And, I'm in a new school. So it's again sort of a new life of, leaving what I knew, what I had gotten accustomed to, and readjusting. And so basically, sort of that's something that I underwent. And throughout, the rest of my time in the UAE, I, shifted or changed a few different schools, which, as anybody in the US who's had to like move towns to shift schools and make new friends, that represents being pushed out of your comfort zone. And though it's really rough, I think if you can sort of accept that and not get caught up in what I'll call the victim trap, there's a lot of power, in sort of acknowledging those trials and tribulations that you went through and how you dealt with that, how you persevered to be who you are today. And so that was until the age of 14, which is when I was sent to the United States of America on my own.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you're back with your family for about 7 years then, 7 to 8 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
exactly.
So here we are now in the U.S.
Yeah. And, what was really interesting is there have been a number of occasions in my life where I have consciously made the choice to step out of my comfort zone without fully considering what that decision will entail and how hard that decision will be. Because I'd be lying to you if I told you that I did not have a choice. Yes, I was sent to the US to be, alone. And when I say alone, I want to clarify that. I was sent to live with extended family. But, my extended family were not people that I had a relationship with, right? Or that I was accustomed to being in their home, or they were accustomed to me. So, we can get to that. But keep in mind that, I very much had a choice. I remember my parents asking me, and I was like, yeah, I want to go to America because, we had visited the US a few times at that point, and I loved how I felt being in this country, and I wanted that, right? Without fully considering how difficult it would be to essentially create, to sort of, be this immigrant and go through what I did on my own. And so, however, though, I will tell you, as irrespective of the trials and tribulations and like the darkness that I grappled with as part of, coming to this country, I have no regrets. I would do it all over, like very hesitantly, but I would still do it all over, because I got tremendous power out of that, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the big point that I'm trying to make here is there have been a lot of moments in my life where I haven't fully considered the implications of my choices of stepping out of my comfort zone and not realized how uncomfortable I would be. But like, I know there's a lot of people out there who are more thoughtful in this regard, where they like consider, exactly what it would entail, and realizing more so than I did how difficult the path might be something that stops them. But like,
yeah, but when you're 14, I mean, it's,
you don't know.
Yeah, you're not really thinking too far ahead of the game, especially. I mean, just in my own experience, when I'm thinking back to when I'm 14 years old, I mean, if you really want something, you're going to voice that opinion that you're having, that feeling, that want. So obviously there was something about America that you really enjoyed and really wanted, that took more so than to stay. Because I know, like, if you didn't really want to go to America, or you didn't want to make that choice, you would have voiced it. I'm sure you would have probably said, no, I like my friends here, or I like this, or I want to be with my parents, or whatever it is that you would have wanted more. You found or felt something that pulled you to make that decision as a 14-year-old child, to really want that leap without, you know, knowing that, oh wow, I'm getting on a plane and going to be in a whole different country where there's a lot of people that aren't like me, that haven't had an experience like me, and I'm now going to be in this position where I am kind of the outlier, and without really even noticing it. Because I'm sure when you did visit the US, you weren't exposed completely for a long enough time period to really feel what you were about to feel, making a decision as a 14-year-old to go to America and become an immigrant.
Exactly. Keep in mind, though, this 14-year-old did something very similar, or this person did something very similar at the age of 26 too. So this is a trend in my life. At the age of 26, at the age of whatever is 17, or actually 19 plus 15. So 34, I pulled the same stunt at the age of 34. So 26 was, my decision to apply to Hopkins and getting in and then going to Hopkins. It was not thought out in a lot of ways, to where when I got to Hopkins and when I was really faced with the rigors, I suffered with so much self-doubt, and I was like, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably what you and I share too, is why we get along so well, because I've made those decisions as well, as getting in a car and just traveling the country of, not knowing what's going on and living out of a car in a tent for 3 months, and you have no idea at the age of 22. But I mean, these are things, you have to have that adventurous spirit, and there's things that happen when you're very young that kind of, I think, almost program you to be able to take those leaps. And which you've shared with us, I'm sure that you being pushed into those different environments at such a young age, I mean, your brain is still, so much of you is just growing still, and growing and absorbing, so that when you experience that, you got that, I guess, thick skin, or that taste of adventure. So when you did become these other ages as you were older, it was like, ooh, you almost kind of wanted it, or it didn't seem as scary, or you didn't need to maybe think it out as much because you were already kind of thrown in the fire in that way.
Yes. My tolerance for jumping into the unknown is higher, and so far it's paid off for me. Yeah. Right. That's not to say that there haven't been moments of a lot of fear. But had it not been for that, I would not have discovered sort of my new, one of my new passions in life, which is, making progress on this, what I call the journey of fearlessness, right? Which is not the absence of fear. It is action despite the fear that you feel. So yeah, coming to America. It was quite the experience, because here I was, I dressed very differently compared to the kids in Orlando, which is where I moved to. I sounded very different because I had a pretty thick accent. My dynamic with girls and relationships, because I came here at the age of 14, I was in 10th grade, and so high school is an age where a lot of people are just exploring love and, of all sorts, right?
Absolutely.
And attraction and, hormones and intimacy and like just, it's complete chaos. And here I am in the midst of all of this. And what's really unique about my personality is I want to be friends with everybody and I want to be accepted by people. The 14-year-old version of me is just like, I want to be accepted. I want to be friends. And, to struggle with that, to struggle with not being accepted for who I was in high school, in the home that I lived, in the community, especially in the community from people who looked like me, right? Who were very, for lack of a better term, very American and not as strongly tied to their brown identity, right? To be made to feel or to allow to be feel less than for being different, it took a very, very heavy toll on my psyche. There were nights when I would cry myself to bed, when, I would sleep to the radio at night. And I remember, there were quite a few of those nights. And primarily, it all stemmed from feeling this loneliness of being, completely on my own and not having the support that felt like home, right? That was a lot to grapple with. But through that darkness, right, I developed the coping mechanism to say, you know what? I'm going to turn into a chameleon. I am going to get into this headspace where I sound like them, I act like them, I am them, right? And so within a year, I'd essentially lost my accent, right? I had made progress, the kind of progress in leaps and bounds, which today when people meet me, right, I am indistinguishable from other immigrants who came here at my age. And it was because of that immense darkness that I went through and my sheer, struggle, whatever, to survive, and the coping mechanism that I was able to do this, that came at a heavy price, because when I was in college, I realized, because that's a point in time when I kind of left my home. I left everything. I made a conscious decision to leave my parents' home, my sister, my extended family, that was in Miami, and to go to Gainesville, Northern Florida, and just start my life anew. And so I just immersed myself even more into being American. I shunned, my religious upbringing. I shunned, my culture in a lot of ways. I still maintained some ties, but I was very much prioritizing being American and forging my American identity at the cost of my own higher education, right? So keep in mind, my undergraduate career spans an illustrious almost 8 years, 7.5 to 8 years, of which the first 3.5, 4 years was just spent living life and adopting and exploring my American identity and, whatever came along with that, good times, right? But I kind of lost myself, whatever myself really was, that I only began to start to reaffirm and find when I went to Hopkins as a grad student.
Mm.
You know,
There's a lot, man. There's a lot in that I want to start asking questions about.
yeah,
But for the sake of just kind of bringing it back, let's kind of go over what do you mean by you being a refugee? What is that? And because when I think of a refugee, I don't even know. I think of somebody, I think of camps, right? Like I think of these camps with like tents and they're gated in and people are kind of just like have their own little community in these like rough areas, and there's like it just almost seems like a lot of people almost in a cage kind of thing.
Yes.
They're trying to essentially survive in a way that they're forced. And
yes.
I guess I would like to understand more of what was your experience as a refugee, and what did that look like, and what is the definition, I guess, of that from your perspective and experience?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I might have used that term at some point, but I don't think that it really applies. So let's axe that term. But let's just call it, sort of basically, I don't know. Because you're absolutely right. I think, especially in light of what's going on, it really represents a certain list of things which in a lot of ways I did not, and my sister and I did not endure, right? As difficult as that time was, we didn't, like you said, we didn't go through that. So let's not use that term. Let's just call it, immigrants fleeing war.
Okay, I see.
For lack of a better term. And so could you reiterate your question, what you'd like me to expound on in that regard?
Oh, no, you answered it. I was trying to understand what this term refugee meant and because maybe a refugee is just anybody that is coming into a new area that doesn't have maybe the opportunities or the resources to live in a way that's quote unquote normal to where they're going, or they so I was just trying to understand that term a little bit better and then hear what you had to say about it. That's all.
Yeah, and I think part of what resonates with that is it was not a choice. We were separated from everything that I knew. Most importantly, my mother at the age of 5. It's like losing your parent in a way that, because we didn't have, telephones the way that we're able to communicate in these days. I wasn't really able to talk to her and like have her, and it felt very lonely, and that was very tough. My sister was a lot younger, and I'm sure she probably has her own trauma associated with being separated from our mom at such a young age that she might not even be aware of. But I have, a good sense of awareness of that loss that I felt that was not my choice, and to then be in a position where I was forced to witness all these things, destitution and poverty, that it was unfathomable to me at that point, considering the resort-like life that I lived in Dubai, right? Or just outside Dubai.
Right. So I guess what I've been curious about through most of this conversation is why did you go by yourself? Was it because just the age that you were at, that was a good age for you to have that, like have your parents bring that option up for you, and why just you and not anybody else in your family? And what was, I don't know how much more time we have, but like what was the how did your family get to America before you, to be able to take you in at that age, and then to be able to raise you. And then if and when did your parents come over to America, then you were reunited with your family again? And that's a lot to unpack, I know, so maybe we can just pick one aspect of that and go with it and see where we go.
Sure. I think we have about 15 minutes left, so we have some time. So it was kind of a strategic decision to send me at that age, because I was about to finish my 9th grade, so I was in high school. And the idea was sending me to the US while I was still in high school would give me the time to acclimate, to understand the system, and really be in the best position to get the best higher education. And it was really about education that drive this whole decision, and all the sacrifices that everybody had to make. Like, one thing I want to call out is it was not easy on my parents to send their eldest child away. I know my parents grappled with a lot being away from me for that long. It was not easy for my sister. It was not easy on my uncle and aunt, to have, even though I'm family, this other child that they have to take responsibility for. And I most certainly, accept how hard it must have been for my cousins, to share their space with this stranger who was so different from them, and to try to like get along, right? So it's not just my struggle, it's like the struggle of everybody involved to accommodate me. And it was all for education. It was all for the American dream, the best education, for the best opportunity, for the best possible, sort of chances to make my dreams come true. Like, let's just take a moment to appreciate how honorable that sacrifice, is, and how privileged I am that so many people would sort of, maybe my cousins didn't have a choice, but they still put up with it, right? To sort of, go through that, just so that Farhan could come to this country and be in the best position to have the best outcome in life. And that goes to show, the kind of privilege that I come from, right? And so it all was as a result of education and having the best opportunity for higher education, which, dictated these actions of like, okay, now is a good time to send Farhan to America, right? To get him into school. I legit arrived the day before, the school year started to America. So I arrived in America. My uncle picked me up from Orlando International Airport, and the next day I started high school at Dr. Phillips in Orlando in 10th grade.
No doubt. Yeah.
Education
for sure. And that's something that seems very common with immigrants, is that it is all about education and opportunity to then be able to receive those chances through the education that you get, the opportunities that comes with.
Yes, exactly.
So did you feel pressured at all? Like, did you feel a lot of pressure at the age of 14, or did that start to come later in life? Or was it more like, no, this is my choice? Like, you felt very, maybe you felt very confident and happy in what was going on, or maybe there was a combination of both.
So I presume you're talking about, sort of when I was already here, right?
As you're getting here, I guess, as a 14.
Yeah.
As you're going through education, like, did you feel like, were you coming to realize what like what you're saying now about all this privilege and this opportunity that you have for yourself now, what did you feel pressure in the sense of your decision making going through higher education and whatnot?
Yeah, I did not feel any of what I'm sharing right now then. Because as soon as I arrived, within weeks, months, I started to understand what I had gotten myself into, and so like I wasn't in a position, or I wasn't able to at that time remind myself the fact that this was a self-imposed choice, that like this is part of the greater good. I was very much in my own self and not really stepping out of myself to see the bigger picture, right? And I think it's something that we all grapple with, being unable to step out of the bigger picture. And so with me, a lot of the suffering that I felt was as a result of my immediate predicament and living in those day-to-day struggles of adjusting and not being accepted, and not realizing the magnitude of shift that I had taken the choice of embarking on, and how it was part of this bigger plan. I didn't have that narrative in my mind to like, put me at ease. But, maybe not having that and like suffering as much as I did and going into that immense darkness is what like caused me to develop this new face, this new psyche of the American Farhan that was so good at, creating this new persona of the American Farhan, who in a lot of ways is very American and can be very American, and as a result can feel very comfortable, being anywhere in this country, right? And getting along with anybody, right? Maybe that would not have come had I put things into perspective, So I don't know if I'm communicating clearly, but
No, that's good. I just, when you talk like that, I think about, like, wow, so you've gained this ability to adapt in such a like extreme way that I'm like thinking, okay, let's throw Farhan down in South America now, or like let's throw you in like another environment, and like, because you're not a shy person, you're very comfortable with yourself and very comfortable with talking and being an expressive person of who you are, and it just, I think there's a lot of beauty and like something to look up to in that type of person that a lot of people wish they did have within them, because it gives you more freedom now from going through those experiences to now be able to navigate the world in a way that I think a lot of people wish or just don't have. And it's not meaning that it would be easier for you, really. I mean, potentially yes, but it's more of like you just have skills that help you be better at adapting to the new situations that you get into. So, and I'm sure that leads into why you made the choices that you have in your 20s and then in your 30s to move around the country as you have and be able to meet people and open up to new experiences, and then be able to have the opportunities that have been presented to you over the last few years, and even just the time period that I've known you that we've talked about, being able to communicate well and be open-minded to, accepting people for who they are, because you have been able to experience like the acceptance of yourself and how different you are to all these new people in this new environment that you're coming into, and now having that compassion and being able to really listen to people and not push people away because of maybe, you know, dogmatics or different beliefs that a lot of people that haven't had those experiences, you know, are very unconscious of, that, you know, we all go through in that sense. So it's really cool.
Yeah. And you know, you said something that really resonated, and I want to pick on it a little bit, which is, as a result of the life that I've had and some of these experiences of being an immigrant and all of that, how I have this propensity to just throw myself out there, how I might still be challenged in the way anybody else would, despite my experiences. And I think that that's absolutely true, because ultimately I'd be lying to you if I said that I like change. You know, in a lot of ways, I don't like change, right? And so when I throw myself in these situations, a lot of times without, without thinking them through entirely, right? I have to grapple with situations, right? And I face a lot of discomfort. But, you know, my life and this like practice of having done that in some shape or form allows me to use those skills to adapt to the change that I did not anticipate or expect, as part of putting myself in that new situation, if that makes sense at all. And I think that ultimately, you know, what I would want to impress upon anybody hearing this is that, you know, yeah, I'm better adept, you know, over the last so many years of having to, you know, reinvent myself and be put in situations where I have to think on the fly and deal with challenges. I still feel very uncomfortable in those situations, but it is that sensation of going from discomfort to comfort in that new reality, and the sigh when that discomfort leaves you as you become comfortable in that new situation, that sigh, that I get, that feels so good. Mm-hmm. That feels so good. And like the new experiences that I have, you know, as a result, that just are almost mystical in nature, you know? Like when I first laid eyes, you know, when I went off on this tangent, when I was going from Denver to Breckenridge, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to take a random ass road, right? And I came across Lake Dillon, right? And I see this perfect day and all those sail boats, just that whole body and out of body, and like that whole experience that I had that words cannot describe, you know, that makes me realize that this world that I live in is so much bigger than me, that my ego is nothing, that like my suffering is nothing, you know, that like ultimately I don't have a reason to fear death, you know, like all these existential things that we grapple with, the career and the this and the that define our ego, it all just melts away in those moments, and I'm just like, life is amazing, you know?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I do know. And I was just right there when you were describing that. Just when you have a moment to just be right here, right now, in a situation that was not planned or accounted for or even like imagined, and you're just in it, and it just happens to be that this is what life is.
Exactly.
Yep, man. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, if you're okay with it, shall we wrap up on this high note?
Yeah, I think it's a great time to wrap it up. So I thank you
Amazing.
for sharing, man. And I mean, there's just so much more I want to talk about, and I hope we get that opportunity. And thank you so much for sharing what you have shared. I know, a lot of that stuff that you spoke on is maybe hard for some people to talk about. So maybe it helps some people be able to, relate or at least feel a bit better about sharing with others as well. And I know it gets personal. And I'm sure we could have gotten a lot more personal. I had a lot of questions that I did want to ask, but maybe that's for another time. But thank you again for on. Look forward to keep getting to know you and sharing this journey with you.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, Sinjin, my friend and the host for today. Thank you so much to our audience for making the time to sort of give us your attention, give us your life, to, sort of take us in. And in today's case, take some of my life in. And I hope that this serves as great fuel for you to reflect upon your own life and how you would like to, sort of see the beauty in your own life, as well as identify opportunities for you to bring more color, bring more richness, bring more experience into your own life. And trust that whatever you decide, if you follow your desire and your passion, you will not regret it eventually. With that, thank you so much. Love and light. Until the next episode, have a great time.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Get Out of Your Comfort Zone series. I hope it moved you and inspired you if you are feeling stuck with something in your life. If you would like to further connect with our guest, please see their contact in the description. Please consider taking a moment to rate this podcast. Please also consider showing us some love on your Instagram story. You can find our info in the episode description. Until the next episode, I wish you infinite love and light. Thank you so much for tuning in.